Hi, this is eBuddyNX from the Candid Frame. As you may or may not be aware of, I'm just started doing a series of videos on black and white conversions. Several people saw the images that I had done in Paris and were asking me how do I convert my images to black and white. And I use a variety of different ways. But today I'm not going to actually going to show you technique. We're going to pull images from the Flickr pool. But what I thought I'd do, since I'm going to be talking about black and white for the next couple of weeks, is that I chose to select images, black and white images that people have submitted over the last several weeks, but to talk about pictures that I felt had to be black and white. There are a lot of images in the Candid Frame Flickr pool that are black and white, but some of those images I think might work just as well in color as they do in black and white. And I was really looking for images that I felt that the fact that they were black and white, the fact that they were monochrome, was really essential in for the success of the photograph, in my opinion. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm not just looking at images that have a nice conversion over to black and white. That's more about technique. What I'm really kind of looking at is images that I felt that because of the content and because of the tones or the contrast were really served by being in black and white. So the first shot that I wanted to talk about was um, this image by T. Leighton Womack, and it's a shot of this cat which he did with a D600. Shot at ISO 200, 1000 the second 3.5. I looked at this shot here and I felt like, this image probably would would work well in color, but there was something about the tones and especially the light here that I think was really served well by the black and white. There's some elements here in the frame, like this looks like maybe it was a yogurt container that's sort of upside down. This is obviously sort of a room here, and to me, this shot probably included several elements of color in it that probably were distracting. None of the images today do I have access to the original color file, so I'm strictly looking at the black and white image. But for me, I really felt that this shot really resonated in terms of just a limited range of tone. You have those whites in the fur of the cat, in the mouth of the bowl here and in the background, and then the rest of it is sort of skewed towards the shadows. There are some middle tones in here, but not a whole lot. And I I really just like the shot. There's so many images of cats that are put up on Flickr and elsewhere. So we kind of get sort of jaded when it looks to images of when we look at images of cats, but I'm not just looking at this image as just yet another cat picture. I'm really looking at it as an exploration of tone, of shape, of line, and form. And I thought that this was really a nice moment. He added what appears to be a good amount of grain to the image because the ISO was fairly low. And I think that really adds to the shot. I think the color shot, if we had the opportunity to see it, would feel more like a snapshot, more of a document of this cat eating on a bowl. And I think that this particular rendering of the shot really provides a point of view in terms of the photographer's vision of how he saw the scene and how he wanted to render it in the final photograph. Here's a shot by Chris, and this shot obviously had a lot of color in there. You have the water, you have the figure here in the foreground, the boats. This looks like it was a overcast day because there's no clouds or really no features in the skies. It may have been um, a bright blue sky. I'm not sure, but the heart of the shot is the outline of the figure in the foreground as well as the boats here, and in the distance the horizon line. This is such a graphic shot that it really is served well by being black and white. There's something about graphic images that are really served well by black and white and monochrome renderings of the shot, because when you have color becomes and it draws your attention. if there's a red or there's a saturated blue or an orange, that draws our attention and sometimes takes away from the graphic nature of the photograph. When we convert over to black and white, we're really simplifying the image in a way and are forcing the viewer to take a look at all the elements in the frame in a very different way. Um, we don't have the opportunity to take the image literally. It seems like it's a translation of sorts from color, just like you would have a translation from a book written in German or in Japanese to English. There is subjective choices that have to be made in terms of the word choices in a translation. And I think the same thing happens with a black and white. Because once you transfer a color image over to a black and white, you're not just pulling out the color. You're making choices in terms of how are you going to render individual tones, how high are you going to increase the contrast or the clarity, or if you're doing localized editing like burning and dodging, what are the things you're going to emphasize and de-emphasize? And that's something that's available to you to a much greater extent than you can with a color file, because as you start manipulating the image in a color file, you have to be very careful about how certain color values can get shifted as a result of applying such changes. But with black and white, you have a lot more latitude here. And I really like just the gesture and how it's emphasized by the fact that we don't have any color to deal with here. We have this just nice sort of curved line here that happens. It's not necessarily an S curve here, but I love the way the flow goes from the hand here. It leads directly to the boat, and then we go up to the boat here, and then we kind of circle back here, and then this line brings us back to the figure. So we have this sort of circular visual path, and this horizon line helps to keep us from just wandering off the top of the frame. It's a really well balanced photograph graphically. Here's a shot by Andreas. This is a lovely shot of this boy reaching up as he tosses this umbrella in the air and is about to catch it. Like the previous shot, graphically, it's an outstanding image. The gesture of the hands, you couldn't ask for better here. The way that the body is really well defined in relation to the background here is wonderful. This is a great use of a limited depth of field. Let's see what he was using here. He was using shooting here wide open at 1.8 at 320th of a second, that is no easy feat. Shooting wide open here, you don't have much in terms of a depth of field, but you seem to really nail it here. So that's great to see. But when I think about this image of how it may have seen in color, the clothing that the child is wearing would have been a real big consideration in terms of the shot. So let's assume that this jacket is like a saturated red or a blue. That color would become this very strong visual draw. And it's really about the gesture, the relationship between the boy and the umbrella, which is really at the heart of this photograph. If this is a saturated red, or if this is a blue, or this is a yellow, yeah, it would help to draw our attention to the boy, but it would de-emphasize the moment here. And I hope that sort of makes sense. I wish I did have the color file because I could make a direct comparison to it. But for me, the reason I think that this has to work as a black and white image is because color has no place in the shot, because it's all about the gesture, the line, and the form, the moment. And I think the black and white helps eliminate any potential distractions. If you look at previous videos, I'm often talking about looking at the edges of your frame to avoid distracting elements like a tree branch or a hand or something coming in that pulls us away from the subject. Well, color can be the very same thing. And I think by pulling out the color, we sometimes have to think about whether the color that exists in our original image really serves what we're trying to do with the photograph, with the subject, with the moment. And if not, then it may be a good opportunity to take out the color and make a black and white image, not just because we favor black and white or because we feel like quote unquote street photography should be black and white. Such choices should be directly related to what we're trying to express in the photograph. And I think for this particular image, the choice to go black and white is a solid one. Here's another shot by Masum Khan, shot with a D7000, 1/80th of a second, 1600 ISO. This train more than likely had some color. I doubt that it was a dark black or even a dark gray. I would assume that the colors here are probably pretty saturated. So this is a shot that I think probably could work just as well as a color shot. But the fact that these dark tones are here, it serves to kind of frame this area here, this bright area here. Everything is working within a frame in the shot. You know, you have the obvious frame of this fellow here in the window, and you have this frame here of this window here, and you have these figures in the background. But these black borders also serve as a kind of frame. Everything is framed here. Even the lettering here is framed. And I think that as a black and white image, again, it helps to reinforce the graphic nature of the shot. Again, I don't know what the colors are were here, especially in relationship to his shirt and his hat and other elements here. I don't know what the colors were, but I feel like the choice to use this as a black and white helps to reinforce the graphic nature. I think whenever we're making shots that are very graphic, we have to strike a balance between actually emphasizing the shape and form, and as opposed to just using color itself as a subject. Because when you have really strong saturated colors like reds and yellows, they become such a draw that sometimes the image itself is all about the color. And if you want to emphasize something else in the shot, say in this case, you know, the figure or the shapes or the sort of the graphic nature of the photographs, sometimes you have to make the choice of taking the color out. Because if you don't, sometimes you're making an image and you have to the viewer has to ask, is this more about the color or is it more about, you know, the shape and the line? Sometimes you can have both. I'm not here to say that you can't have a graphic image that has very saturated color, because you can certainly do that. But as the photographer, you have to decide, well, what is this image about? And for me, this shot is about the graphic nature of the overall composition, and just the body language of this figure here. And I think that it really works well as a black and white as a result. Here's a portrait by Gavin Beckford, and this shot, I think, tone wise is great. You have her nice skin tone here, the darkness of her hair, the white of her blouse, and then sort of the gray, the background here. I think you're dealing with a fairly limited range of tones here, and I think it really works well as a black and white. Again, imagine this as a color image. The choice of the background would be absolutely critical here. I don't know if it's a white background that was underexposed slightly in order to render it as gray, or whether it was another color, such as a green or a brown or something like that. But whatever it was, the nature of the color of that background will be really critical for how we perceive her as a subject. That white, what appears to be a white or a light colored dress, and her skin tone and her hair are really the point of emphasis here. And then you'd have to be really careful about, well, what's the color of this background going to be? You know, if it's just gray, then it probably sort of a moot point. But if it's another color, then you have to think about the relationship between that color of her skin, that brown color of her skin, and whatever color the background is. And sometimes the choice of the background can be a real distraction. I tend to favor really saturated colors for my background sometimes, but sometimes that really doesn't serve the subject. And if I'm trying to express something about, you know, the woman here that Gavin is photographing, then that background, especially if it was sort of a found background, may not exactly work for the color shot. All the photographers whose pictures I'm mentioning in this video, If you care to, can upload the images, color images, to the Flickr pool so that we can see this sort of after the fact, because I think many people would be curious to see what the original color files look like. Okay, and here's the last shot by Jake Johnson, this street scene, and he was shooting this on film with a Mamiya 645 with Delta 400. Again, this is one of those shots where it's just about the graphic nature. It's about the line and the shapes. You have that figure walking past the camera here, looking up towards the building in this half of the frame, and then you have this other fellow here wearing a suit and a hat here, and it's their body language creates this shape that is just as important as the shape as the manhole, the repeating rectangles of the windows, the scaffolding. It's shape everywhere that you look here. Obviously, if this image was shot in color, it would probably be a nice color shot. But I think that since we're emphasizing line and shape and form and gesture in the shot, pulling out the color allows us to just focus on that. I'll be really curious about this shot in color, but we're not going to see it in color because he was shooting a black and white film. And I think making the choice with film was, you had no choice. You either had to go with black and white or color film. You really had very little choice before digital being able to make the conversions. But with digital now, we can shoot these color files now, especially if you're shooting raw, and then we can within seconds convert it over to black and white. And I think something that's lost there is making the conscious choice before you release the shutter of how you want the images to look. I think that we have a propensity now, because it's so easy to go from color to black and white, is to simply shoot stuff in color and then later on pull the image in Photoshop or in Lightroom and then make the choice as to how it's going to look like in black and white. And I think what I'm suggesting is to still shoot in raw and convert later to black and white, but to be consciously aware of how, when you're shooting, of how you want the image to look if you want to do it in black and white. One of the easiest ways to do that is to basically set your camera to one of the picture styles where you can just see it in black and white. Your raw file is still going to be in color, but what you're seeing displayed on the back of your camera and in the instant after you've made your exposure is going to be a black and white rendering of the JPEG. And that can start giving you a sense of, okay, how do I want to make this shot? How do I want to compose for the scene or the subject? So in the back end, I can make real creative choices of how I want this image to look as a monochrome. But as I mentioned before, we're going to be doing a series of videos. I just did a video on Tuesday where I talked about the converting my color images into black and white just using Lightroom without any plugins. But in the video that I'm going to be releasing next week, I'll be showing you how I do it with the plugins, and in the subsequent weeks I'm going to be using a variety of different plugins. So it's like Nick Silver FX Pro I'm going to be talking about, Alien Skin, Exposure 6, and a couple of other ones. So if you're really interested in black and white conversions, you can expect in the subsequent Tuesdays that you'll be seeing a variety of different ways of being able to convert your images from color to black and white, and hopefully you'll find that interesting. If you're just discovering this video and you've not joined the Candid Frame Flickr group, please do. All you have to do is ask to join, and I'll be glad to add you, and you can upload images and check out what other people who listen to the show are doing photographically. And if you're finding us for the first time and you've never heard of the Candid Frame, well, if you visit thecandidframe.com, you'll find over 246 or 48 interviews now that feature conversations with some of the world's best established and emerging photographers. And if you love photography and you want an alternative to magazine articles and other podcasts that just talk about equipment, and you want to hear about creativity and making photography your life choice, then you'll want to check it out. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.